Howdy ladies, so we're back for a part 2 of this video. Thank you so much for your comments on the last video letting me know. If you have not seen part 1, please go back and watch part 1, but I think part 2 probably will stand alone on its own. So just a recap of part 1, we're talking about how there aren't enough good men for every good woman in the dating scene.
Similarly, when we talk about education, a man with a master's degree on Tinder gets 90% more right swipes than a man with a bachelor's degree. So for all of the guys that are considering going and getting a master's degree, even if you think it's going to be useless, at least accept the fact that you get 90% more right swipes for the rest of your life, or just lie about your master's. I don't know. All of this rolled together describes something called hypergamy, which is the female tendency to date up and across. On average, women want to date a man who is as educated or as employed as they are. Now, in a world in which, quite rightly, women have finally been able to achieve parity in education and employment and status and have independence and not be financially reliant on their partner, all the rest of it, that's great for them. But it does cause some challenges for their dating. And this is what I've called the tall girl problem. So everybody knows what it's like to have a girlfriend who is 6 foot without heels. You go, if you want to wear heels, you're looking at professional athletes. Because on average, women want to date a man who is at least as tall or a little bit taller than they are. So as women rise up through their own competence hierarchy in education and employment, they further shorten down the potential pool of eligible men that are as educated or more educated and as employed or more employed than they are. This is a challenge. This is just a straight up imbalance, right? What this causes is a very large group of men toward the bottom of this distribution to be essentially invisible to women. It causes a very large number of women, an increasing cohort, to compete for an increasingly small group of turbo-chad super performers at the top. These guys, the super high value guys, have a wealth of options, so they are commitment averse. Why would they decide to sit down with one girl for the rest of time when they have this wealth of options, which can cause them to use and discard many of these women?
So what this sounds like to me is that men view women as assets to be collected, and a lot of men have no interest in being faithful. They're just faithful when they feel like they don't have other options. They're faithful when they know they need the woman they're with and what she provides. This is also why you see so many men with these rags to riches stories, and then they leave the woman once they have any ounce of success. How many men do you see who are CEOs, professional athletes, famous rappers, musicians? They ditched the woman who was there to support them when they were struggling. He no longer needs her because he can get the services she offers from someone he now deems as higher value than her. Most men date the best woman that they think they can get at that time, not the woman who they think has qualities they won't be able to find in another woman. You've probably heard other people say this. Women tend to settle down when they find the man that they think is the love of their life and they know he's just it for them. Men tend to wait until they feel like they're ready to settle down, and then they just look around for who's available.
Which then causes most of these women to resent men overall. And then the guys that were forgotten at the bottom that say, well, hang on a second, I didn't use and discard you. I haven't even been seen by you. No, all men are whatever it might be.
This would be true if all of these women were actually getting the top 10% of men. The majority of women are actually dating those men that he's calling invisible or middle of the road to the bottom rung of men. That's what most women are dating. So when women have negative experiences, it's from men of all socioeconomic statuses. Men are hardwired to use and conquer. So no matter what level a man is on, he will look to level up if he thinks he can. He's making it sound like the top 10% of men use and discard women, but the other men are good matches and they're just being ignored by women. That's not true at all. A lot of women have had the experience that the lower a man is on the pecking order, the worse she gets treated by him. A lot of men are insecure because they're basically failing at patriarchy. They don't match up to what they're told men are supposed to achieve. So in turn, when those women get into relationships with these men, their insecurity can come out in a lot of different ways. And a lot of times it comes out in the form of abuse.
Right, that they are users and abusers, that we don't need them, that we're all of the good men at, etc., etc. There's a big group of men that feel like they are good men that are invisible. There's a big portion of women who have finally managed to achieve educational and employment independence that are chasing after a smaller group of guys. These guys are commitment averse. I don't think it's necessarily good for them either. It's the child with the ice cream, right? Like guys being able to keep it in their pants when there's a lot of options on the table is going to be difficult for them too. This is one of the main drivers. This tall girl problem is a massive change, I think, in the dating dynamics.
If I make Chris Williamson the prime minister or president of the world and I say your first job is to fix this challenge, what do you do?
The first thing that you don't do is roll back women's education and employment. And this is one of the problems with this discussion, right? The things that I've just said there are borne out in Pew Research data, Morgan Stanley results. Like these are incontrovertible facts, right? They are there. And any girl that is listening who earns more than £50,000 a year and has got a master's or above level education and is toward their late 30s or toward their late 20s or in their 30s knows this problem. You know the fact that you are struggling to find a man that you feel is eligible for you, right? That needs to be out there. The problem that happens around this discourse is that it posits men and women as adversaries and competitors of each other, right? As enemies.
It's driving me nuts that he keeps calling women girls, but that's besides the point. I want you to understand that men are not supposed to compete with women by nature. The natural competitive nature in men biologically exists to have men compete with other men to gain access to a woman, or have men fight other men to protect their community. They are not supposed to be competing with women. If you look at most species in nature, weak males are not supposed to have access to women, and their genes are not supposed to be carried on. If they cannot conquer other males, they don't get to mate. So human males who cannot compete with other males then turn around and compete with women. The weak-minded males will always find another group to oppress. If men's achievements grew at the same rate as women's achievements, then we wouldn't have this huge problem that we have today. So again, whose fault is that? Women have been held back since the beginning of time, so none of us even know what women are capable of. But we're starting to see that if women do not have to rely on men for resources, women grow exponentially more than men do. Women are much more interested in self-reflection, growth, building compassion, building emotional intelligence. These are things that are innate in women, but it's becoming painfully obvious to us that this is not innate in a lot of men. Never forget that if a man is competing with you, it's because he's trying to drag you down to his level.
This means that worthwhile compassion, which is needed to both women and men, if you're a woman who has gone through your education, you've dedicated yourself to achieving a degree, you know, your mother's generation wasn't able to achieve this and you're the first person that's maybe gone to uni or got a bachelor's or got a master's or got a PhD, and then you spend some time in a career grinding away and you now earn 150 grand a year, and you think, right, I'm 31, I'd love to settle down, this would be amazing for me. Where are all of the men at? Hang on a second. And what you realize is that not only now are you competing with all of the other increasing cohort of women that are high achievers with status, employment, and education, but you're also competing with a 21-year-old barista who still lives at home with her parents for this small cohort of guys. That requires sympathy for women, okay? That is not a good position for women to be in.
So he's talking about women who are late 20s and 30s who have achieved a lot, and now they have problems because the men that they're after will also date the 21-year-old barista who lives with her parents. Now, this is something that if a woman has not done the work to dismantle her internalized misogyny, she would hear him say that, immediately start feeling sorry for herself, and her self-esteem would take a hit, hearing that all of these men that she's after would easily go for somebody younger with absolutely no experience. Now, when I hear him say that, I hear him describing a man who has inferior values to mine. A man in his 30s who is just as likely to go for the 20-year-old barista who lives with her parents as he is to go for a woman his age that has the same level of achievements he does, that man is most likely a predator. That's not a high-value man, as he's calling it. That's a man with an extremely fragile ego who's self-centered and wants total domination over the mind and eventually the body and soul of his partner. Once he successfully brainwashes her into playing the role he requires of her, she's going to be in a terrible situation that will be hard for her to remove herself from. I want you guys to notice this, and notice it specifically when you listen to men talk about women and what women want. They always come from the angle that a woman needs a man. Like he's saying, we should have sympathy for women because they've spent all this time getting educated and moving up in their careers, only to find that men with money and success are just as interested in the women who are barely legal. I require no sympathy because this solidifies why I'm so happy that I stopped dating. And this also confirms my decision to completely decenter men from my life. These so-called high-value men can chase whoever they want because men like he's describing are of zero value to me. You can have the 20-year-old barista that lives with her parents. Please, just stay away from me.
At the same time, this huge cohort of sexless men, 30% of men haven't had sex in the last year. 50% of men say that they are not looking for a relationship. You are a man. You have been through your 20s. You know the power of the male sex drive between the ages of 18 and 30. Can you imagine getting yourself into a situation where you say, I'm not bothered about pursuing women? That is an unbelievably extreme statement for men to make. And they're self-identifying as this in Pew Research data. This isn't on incel forums. This is Pew Research. 50% of men aren't looking for a relationship.
When they say aren't looking for a relationship, do they mean I'm not looking for a woman or I'm not looking for commitment?
Not actively pursuing any kind of interaction with women.
Oh, shit.
Casual included.
What?
50%.
So you see how hard it is for this interviewer to understand that 50% of men could just choose to be opting out? That's because this is not a choice. There's a large number of men now who are so underwhelming that they have zero capability to gain any interest from a woman. So in turn, they choose to opt out of trying anymore. That's what they're choosing to opt out of, trying. They're not choosing to opt out of being in a relationship with a woman because we know that if women threw themselves at these 50% who say they're not interested, they would come running. So they're choosing not to try anymore because they kept trying and failing. Now they realize that women have no interest in them, and now they're angry and bitter at women because they don't see the value in these men that have nothing to offer.
You asked about solutions. The first thing that we need to do is turn down the volume of adversarial nature between these two. Anybody that listens to those two stories, right, the plight of men and the plight of women in the modern dating world, and doesn't see it as, wow, that's fucked. That really, really sucks for both sexes. Men have it worse in some ways, women have it worse in different ways, right? This isn't a competition of like, oh, let's wave the flag of who's actually accumulated more victimhood points.
So notice what he's saying sucks, though. Women who have achieved success aren't being valued by their successful male counterparts, and the men that are left aren't qualified to date them. And a third of men haven't been able to find a hole to stick their you-know-what in. So we're supposed to have sympathy for both, but I can't feel sympathy for these men who have nothing to offer, who are complaining that they don't have a woman's body to use for their pleasure. So if you look at both sides of this, shallow men are not finding a woman to use for their pleasure, and women are not finding suitable partners to date because men are shallow. So in conclusion, men are shallow.
The first thing that needs to happen before anything is the volume of the conversation needs to be turned down. We need to see the challenges that are faced by both sexes. The second thing that needs to be put out front is that there needs to be a way to raise men up without bringing women down, because it is very easy for you to say, okay, so women are out achieving men in education and employment. Let's just put the reins on them, and then everything's going to be brought back. You go, look, I am not trying to roll back any of the gains that have been made by women over the last 50 years. But you do want to have eligible male partners, right? If the thermodynamics of attraction include the fact that women tend to want to date across and up in terms of status, employment, and education, you need to do something, right? Some of the things that you could look at doing in terms of solutions would be redshirting boys, so starting boys in school 1 year later. This is something that was put forward by Richard Reeves. The reason for this is that boys tend to mature less quickly than girls. If you were to start boys 1 year later in school, it would mean that they would be more effective at their age. They would be more mature mentally. That's one start. Another one that I think is probably more controversial, but would make a big impact, would be to stop derogating motherhood, right? To start pedestalizing motherhood again. There is a huge movement in certain corners of women's advice that any woman who decides to become a mother is essentially a second-class citizen. I don't think that that's true. I don't think that a woman that chooses to become a mother is a second-class citizen.
The reason women feel like second-class citizens is because men treat them as such. We can see this in statistics. The domestic violence against women, the assaults against women, the laws that are being made to control women. Men treat women like second-class citizens. So the fact that he's blaming mommy blogs or women giving advice to women, I have no clue what he's talking about. They're trying to take away our access to health care. Now they're even trying to get rid of birth control and other contraceptives. They're trying to force women to birth babies because they realize the power that women have. Women birthed the entire population of the world since the beginning of time. That's a tremendous power. That's why they're trying to force you to have babies, but then they'll make you fight tooth and nail to get the father to contribute financially. And they'll make you fight tooth and nail to get extra resources to take care of that child that they forced you to have. This is why I really hope that women all over the world start becoming very selective about what men they choose to sleep with. Very selective. And people like myself have selected 0 men to sleep with. But even if you are choosing to still date men or sleep with men, women need to realize how much control we have over the future of what happens in society. We control which men get to pass their genes on. We control which men are sexless and which aren't. We need to start being very selective to prove who has the power, because these men are trying to have complete and total domination over us, and a lot of women are allowing that to happen.
But women often fear becoming just a mother, right? Or just a wife, or at worst, a domestic prostitute. And they flee from this specter of family life into the open arms of a corporate employer. And laughably, we call this process freedom.
Now, understand what goes through the mind of a man or a young teenage boy who's watching this guy and listening to what he's saying. No matter what women say, weak-minded men will always listen to what they deem as an alpha male and take what he says as the law. It enrages me that he's saying laughably we call this freedom. You know what freedom is? Freedom is when women get to do whatever they want. I'm getting really sick of the amount of men that are trying to tell not only men, but also women what women should be doing. What women should be doing is whatever the hell women want to do. The end. If a woman wants to work, she should work. If a woman wants to have a kid, she should have a kid. If a woman wants to be a stay-at-home mom, she should be a stay-at-home mom, as long as she understands the risks she's assuming. Men watch stuff like this and then regurgitate what a man is telling them about what women want. This is why men say, oh, women don't really want to work. They just have to if their man doesn't make enough money. It couldn't possibly be that the woman just enjoys having a career or has goals and aspirations that don't involve fornication and baby vomit. How shocking.
How can it be that the thing that most of us are grateful for, a great mother in our life, has now been derogated as some sort of it's like somebody's been rubed into a role that the patriarchy always wanted them to do, right? There was an article a little while ago that said maternal instinct is a myth. That basically the only reason that maternal instinct exists is because the patriarchy has convinced women that they're actually supposed to like kids. It's like, I can't even begin to explain how ridiculous that is if you look at all of the sex differences in terms of the way that humans work. Pedestalizing motherhood would make women fear being a mother less. It would make it an aspirational goal for them to pursue.
So now he's just straight up gaslighting. Does he not think that women know exactly what motherhood entails? It's not like we have generations upon generations of examples of women becoming mothers and being treated like second-class citizens by men. They've been pedestalizing motherhood for decades. Of course, pedestalizing motherhood was always a form of gaslighting to keep women quiet. Has he ever seen magazines from like the 60s and the 70s? I pulled a few so you guys could check it out. Husband-pleasing coffee. Got a good man? Get him good coffee. Acme's coffee. Keep him happy. Shop Acme. What's for dinner, honey? Am I doing it okay, Mom? And she says, they need me. Life insurance, because if Mom dies, the world falls apart. The more they need you, the more you need Prudential. So really, if the wife dies, all they need is money, then they can just pay to replace her services. Or this one, Now She Can Cope. Butasol, daytime sedative for everyday situational stress. And we wonder why so many housewives have had undercover drug problems. Whether you wash sheets, curtains, or baby's diapers, you'll feel like a queen with this new washing machine. And of course, we can't forget to start them early. Make sure your daughter knows about her future life as an indentured servant. Because you're a woman, a reason to learn the pure facts about orange juice. Or this one, because we all know that women want cleaning products for Christmas. Anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. As always, please like and subscribe and turn on all notifications. Have a good day, ladies.